Hey yo, what's up, fellas? I got Plants and Queer, Jewish, anti-communist. I mean,
Whoa,
anti-Zionist.
whoa, great. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa.
literally, all my comments have been you have fucked up every single intro, I've been continuing it. Anti-Zionist, Jewish, content creator. They make excellent anti-Zionist videos, just tackling Zionism and its myths. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name is Murph, better known as Plants and Queer on TikTok and Mix with an X, Murph on Instagram. And I am Jewish. I am staunchly anti-Zionist, staunchly anti-imperialism. I'm a little baby commie anarchist. I have been a political activist and advocate for several years, online and on the ground. And I used to be a clinical forensic therapist, and I was in school for clinical forensic psychology in grad school. And so I used to work with individuals who had committed crimes as their therapists. So I've seen a lot. I've been working since I was 15. I've lived in 3 different countries while studying. So I've seen a lot, want to see more, and want to do more all the times.
Before we begin this, how is your time as what did you say you were, a clinical therapist?
A clinical forensic therapist, yeah.
Clinical forensic therapist. How did that affect your political views? Were you sort of like even more of a baby leftist before that and sort of opened up your eyes, or were you already radicalized?
I would say I was on the brink.
Okay.
I knew where I wanted to go. I just hadn't mentally gotten there. I don't think I had the environment. We'll talk about this later, but growing up around Zionism, to be radicalized with knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Penn State and did criminology and psychology, and then moved to California to work as a therapist while in grad school. And that will fundamentally change you. My first year I worked in private sector with men who had committed sex crimes while they were on parole or probation. And then my second year, I worked within the California Department of Corrections and supposedly rehabilitation. And that messed me up. That changed me.
What was the second group?
The second group was individuals who were kind of in a facility, not like a halfway house. They were still incarcerated, but they were allowed to leave the premises with a ankle monitor on to go get jobs, get IDs, reunite with family, kind of reestablish their lives, so that once they were officially released, they were in like a secondary facility that wasn't prison anymore. So that once they were released, they had a foundation to work with. They had housing, they had healthcare, they had a job, ID, identification, and hopefully reintroduction with their communities.
Okay. And what exactly about that really affected you so deeply?
Working with a system that works against who you're trying to help.
Yeah.
As a therapist there, I'm supposed to be there for them and them only. I wasn't a social worker there. I wasn't department head. I was just there for them and trying to get them their needs met and help them become stable and maybe, hopefully, not reoffend. And the system works against you, works against your clients to get the things that they want. It's more what the system wants them to do. And so if they don't fit within the box of the rules of the more loose environment they're now being released into, then it's not just a slap on the wrist. They're basically being like released into a camp with the same prison rules and the same prison people. I guess it's that everything is working against them to be successful, while the image of working for them is there. I guess. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing really rehabilitative about America's prison industry. I mean, especially since sort of like we have like a legalized slavery codified into law in our 14th Amendment, which is like slavery as a punishment. And so I think overall America has like a very oftentimes it has this very great incentive to keep these people in the prison system as long as possible so that it can get this very easily exploitable source of labor. I mean, we can pay them like 14 cents, 12 cents an hour, just insane amounts. And there's just nothing rehabilitative about our prison system. I think from the outside, like what the normal American thinks of the prison system is this very like black and white thinking. Like if you ended up in prison, you were sort of a quote unquote bad guy. And you come out of prison maybe like a quote unquote good guy, or you're like permanently marked with this mark of bad guy or something like that, and don't deserve good, fair, humane treatment. But the majority of people in American prisons currently are just there's this excellent book that was released called The New Jim Crow. It's just black people, Hispanic people who were caught doing selling or had drugs on them for nonviolent drug crime offenses, and these groups, the poor people of color, have drug usage at the same rates as rich white communities, but it's purposefully been used to completely destroy and continue sort of a legalized form of Jim Crow and second-class citizenship. And going from that...
Thank you for broadening the scope of what I was trying to get at. I was in depth getting at.
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, I'm an outsider, so I only know like the really broad. I don't know the nitty-gritties of the prison system. I have dealt with the legal system, like hiring a lawyer, going to court, things like that. Like really that ugly side of it. But I've never been.
Traditional, yeah.
Yeah, I've never been in prison, so I think both of these perspectives are important. But moving on from this system of apartheid that we have in America to another one, excellent transition there from me, Israel. So I sent you a list of questions last night. I was under the assumption that you had been born in Israel. I don't know why. I could have sworn you said something about that.
I did not. I was not born in Israel, though I did live in Israel. I am born and bred in America. Rah.
Okay. So I was way off, but you said you have lived briefly in Israel. How did that experience shape you, and how you just viewed the Zionist project overall? And could you go into detail, like how did you even end up in Israel in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a little bit of my little Jewish background. I think that might help, not to qualify my Jewishness. But I grew up in a very Zionist environment, went to camp, was in a nationally Jewish sorority in college, was bar mitzvahed, went through all of Hebrew school and was confirmed, yada, yada, whatever. Was in youth group. And when I was in high school, I felt very sheltered, as in I had helicopter parents, and I wanted to free myself of that. And I saw that some of my friends from camp had gone to Israel to study abroad while in high school. And I always loved to travel as a kid. I was very thankful or very blessed that I was able to do that. And So I said to my parents, hey, I've always felt really, iffy about religion. I haven't understood why I don't really fit in with these groups of people that I've been surrounded by my whole life. I'd really like to connect to my Judaism, maybe in a non-spiritual way, in like a cultural way, and just being immersed there. And I'd like to also get a practice for how it'll be when I go off to college where my parents aren't. So helicopter. So I studied abroad there in my senior year for a semester and spent a winter there. I kid you not, I did not know what Zionism was until I left Israel.
Okay. I can believe that. I can believe that, especially as a sheltered youth that's not really like paying attention.
2011.
Okay.
This is like on the precipice of 2012, which is like when another conflict kind of stirred up over, and another quote unquote conflict stirred up over there, as my community would call it.
Uh-huh.
And when I came back and spoke to one of my friends who had been the previous year, and he was like, yeah, you didn't like feel the urge of everybody like trying to get you to move there and like come like serve in the military. They weren't trying to pressure you to do that. Like me, often, I don't think they even tried because they wouldn't think that that was ever something I would be okay with. But when he told me about Zionism, I opened up my laptop, looked into it, and when I had that framework of what Zionism was, and then had my experience of being in Israel, of crossing the Green Line, which is what they called like border with the West Bank, having gone into the West Bank, being able to conceptualize all, like being a coconut, it blew my mind, and I never looked back. Said fuck Israel from that day forward, because I had seen it with my own eyes. I didn't have the context to know what I was seeing. I knew something was wrong. I knew what I was being told wasn't the truth because I ask questions. I am that kind of neurodivergent. Yeah. I will ask questions. And I mean, I became a forensic psychologist or therapist because I want to help people who are oppressed, people who have been wrong and are trying to be right, or who are wrong and aren't trying to be right. It doesn't matter to me. I'm trying to help. Yeah. And that's always been who I am. And so having the context, it's kind of like doing acid without any acid. Your kind of mind crumbles around you.
Yeah, the entire world that you've ever known. And then I've often heard people who've gone to the West Bank talk about how it's almost like a modern day version of the Jim Crow South, and even sometimes more intense, like cops pulling over, Israeli soldiers pulling over random cars with guns, pointing at people. It's a total system of dehumanization. Did you see anything like that?
Absolutely. I think just even describing getting into the West Bank is mind-blowing to some people. You can't just say, hey, I want to go to this settlement for a weekend, which is what I literally didn't know it. Well, I knew it was a settlement at the time. I knew what I guess I was doing going into the West Bank. I just didn't know the violence that had occurred to obtain this settlement.
Yeah, I mean,
for people listening, you can go look up Shiloh, Shilo. You have to get paperwork, and since I was a minor at the time, I had to get like government documents signed, notarized by my parents, by the U.S. like consulate for Israel. Then they had to be signed by like the Israeli consulate for the United States. They all had to be notarized. I had to get my passports and this and that. We were then after like a week and a half of everything getting finalized, we were then put into a bulletproof armored truck with blacked out windows so that we couldn't see out. And then we crossed multiple checkpoints with, I don't know if you've seen pictures of these checkpoints. They are fully armed. I mean, when you're crossing a fence there, they have autonomous cameras and guns and snipers, like just pointed, just in case apparently something might happen. Just pointed at all times inside of the non-settler communities.
Yeah, and Zionists always justify this through hypotheticals, right? Like, if this wasn't there, then hypothetically, Palestinian terrorists would do this, Palestinian terrorists would do that. But of course, this is all in theory, right?
Delusional, it's persecution paranoia. It's literally a textbook case. Like, they are the fear of persecution.
Absolutely.
I when I was a kid. And it's like your paranoia doesn't justify going and then doing what you're afraid people are going to do to you. Like, that's abuse. Like,
right.
That's Darbo, baby.
Right. Their entire argument is sort of based off of this hypothetical. But when in practice, they do far more damage than a quote-unquote Palestinian terrorist could ever do to just humanity itself. I mean, it's insane. And I can't imagine this from the Palestinian side. I mean, to be a second-class citizen in your own land, right? To have these people come from overseas or, even other Arab countries, especially Morocco. A lot of Israelis are from Morocco. And for them to settle into your land, take your home, protect these settlers who are, nothing more than just another wing of their military. They're these armed people who are sort of almost like freelance mercenaries that go in and do the terrorism that Israeli society can't really do openly. It's sort of like a state-sponsored freelance terrorism. Is that how you would describe the settlers, or?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And not only that, the official like military also like recruits their mercenaries from outside of the country. Like, where else are people just serving in another military for another country?
I cannot imagine being a stranger in your own homeland, a second-class citizen in your own homeland.
And being told that, like, your home isn't yours because somebody else had it 50 million years ago. And it's just like, what?
Right.
What?
Right. I think it's a very hard thing for Americans to understand what truly it is to live under Israeli occupation. Just being randomly beat by 17, 18-year-olds with guns and power who...
And you try to conceptualize it as like, okay, stop and frisk. But It's like not just the police. It's like Bob who lives down the street who wants your house.
Right. Right. No, it's just insane.
What I try to do is like try to have people like conceptualize like what that would look like here. Because like these are the same people who are like, yeah, raw, stand your ground laws. And it's like, oh, yeah? So Palestinians can't have that, no?
Right. Right. And no, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to
say. Okay. No, it's suffocating. It's suffocating to just see the conditions that Palestinians live in for the crime of having been born Palestinian. I mean, what other crime have they done? And being at the end of this crazy state building project run by the most insane people on earth, right? These Europeans and various
gaslighting,
various other groups that have convinced themselves that they are somehow both native to the Levant and that they are that indigeneity is apartheid, settler colonialism, and genocide. Like this is the definition of indigeneity, and this is what indigenous people do. But
Yeah, indigenous people never destroy their own land.
exactly,
That has never happened once in history.
Exactly.
Like, it's wild.
Yeah, the Western world's war. I've heard this said. I can't really give a source, so I apologize for that. But I heard recently that the Western world's war was not only against people of the global South, it's against the Earth itself. And you can really see that in how they abuse natural resources as opposed to indigenous ways of cultivation, and also how they currently abuse the land of Palestine. No indigenous person would destroy this land like Israelis do. But could you go further into your?
Hold on. We also know about the oil that's right off the shore.
Right.
The strip.
Right.
So it's all of these, resources that white people feel entitled to because money means power and oil and that.
Absolutely. But could you go a little bit more into your experiences in that settler camp silo?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So once we got out of the truck. It's kind of like you're getting the cap taken off of your head, and you see this like cute raised. Keep in mind a lot of the settler communities are higher up because safety. You get these nice views. They're, it's Shabbat weekends and they're Orthodox. So there's no electricity on in the neighborhood, but everybody's still carrying their weapons. Wild thing to see. I grew up on the East Coast, not in the South, not in an open carry state. I'd never seen so many guns, large guns, not just in the West Bank, but in Israel in general, of just people walking around like it's a purse, like it's just their backpack, just another thing they've slung over their arm for the day.
Right. And it's insane that they've walked into essentially somebody else's land, into somebody else's home, taken it, and now they walk around with guns like armed thugs, constantly mentally sort of besieging the population, right? It's not only a physical besiegement of the people of, the West Bank, Gaza, but it's also a mental besiegement. And of course, Palestinians are not allowed to be armed whatsoever. So
not even with a rock.
So this is just an insane settler project. And Zionists used to be very honest. I think you can really see how Zionism doesn't really stand for anything and how it went from being a colonial project, according to Theodore Herzl in his letter to Cecil Rhodes. And it was openly called a colonial project. America, in many legislations, talked about the colonization of Palestine or the colonization of Israel to a quote-unquote indigenous project, land-back project. In about the 80s, 90s, you can see how it stands for nothing when it's so openly able to morph itself into whatever it needs to for optics.
And the hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy, yes. If you want to add anything.
Knowing the violence and the destruction that could potentially happen to you, that paranoia because you once did it to somebody else. Like the settlers are on edge all of the time because they're in the wrong. They know that that they've taken can be taken away from them at any time because they have no true ownership of it. And it's just wild that we're talking about like ownership and things like this when we're literally just talking about human lives.
Right.
Like people having to we talk about Theodore Herzl, and we could talk about Jewish Zionism, and we could talk about Christian Zionism and how you could say that, oh, well, the Palestinians apparently worked with the Nazis. Well, the Nazis worked with the Zionists. Arguably, the Zionists started the Nazi Party.
Right.
Like, this all, like, has such an interplay of, like, propaganda, of tokenizing and weaponizing trauma, generational trauma, weaponizing
generational trauma for Jewish people.
Weaponizing that, yeah.
Okay.
I wish they would weaponize the Palestinian trauma a little more. And weaponizing the imperialist support of the West, of like, well, it doesn't matter because we're gonna preemptive, and we've had the UN on our side for decades, and now we're gonna weaponize the UN. We're gonna use the Balfour Declaration to claim ownership, and then to say, like, everything is so moral to them until somebody uses a historical fact. Well, Balfour Declaration.
Right.
Well, it's like Theodore Herzl, and have you actually gone past the Wikipedia front page?
Right.
Have you gone past what your rabbi and what you learned in Hebrew school and what you're seeing with your circle? That weaponizing the illusion of community because our community was taken away from us.
Yes. It's a very odd project overall because it's a project where God promised these people land, and yet most of the people, they don't believe in a God. Like a large majority of this population is atheistic, but they still believe that God has promised them this land. It's this very odd duality. Absolutely.
God is very, very useful when you want something. And especially when that want is healing shame or embarrassment, or like a desire that you can't. Well, and Jewish people aren't the only people that use it.
Right.
A lot of Christians will use hell. Jewish people don't believe in hell. As a, like, well, you can go to hell, so you're not going to hurt me, but I'm going to hurt you because I don't believe in that.
Right.
And then without realizing that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all pray to the same God.
Absolutely. I mean, these are all Abrahamic religions. It's such an odd it's such an odd divide in just this thinking, where you're able to say that God gave you this land and then also not even believe in God himself. And then also, to add to that, Israel is this weird sort of theocratic, atheistic state, which doesn't even have a constitution. And so it really just feels like they're making
stand for something consistently.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It really just feels like they're making up the rules as they go. Even the shittiest, like, liberal states, and even communist, socialist experiments usually have a constitution which, in theory, defines what a human being is, what rights that human being has. But Israeli society,
they don't even believe that water is a human right. So
right. They'll cut off.
They don't need a constitution, because if they had a constitution, they'd have to treat everybody presumably the same legally within their own confines, not within the international confines.
Absolutely.
Because the UN doesn't matter now, because the UN's done their job. They've given the Jews Israel, so they don't need the UN anymore. They can attack them.
Absolutely.
And they have to set up this dichotomy of, like, we're all different, because if they realize that there were Jews, Christians, Muslims, non-religious people who were all living together before the Holocaust happened in Palestine, they'd have to reckon with the fact that not everybody's against Jewish people, and you don't have to like be violent to get something.
Absolutely.
Get something they should be having, but
yeah. This was gonna be a question for later, but why do you think Zionists have such an internal victim complex? I can sort of give my 2 cents in that, but I'll let you go first.
It's so bad. Why don't you go first? My brain's collecting.
Okay. Okay. I'll say that Zionists have an internal victim complex, first of all, because they sort of are a spoiled child labor. They're sort of a spoiled child working class, you know, is how I describe them. They're this working class that has been handed everything in the world by the British Empire, which essentially did immense amounts of violence, especially through the Balfour Declaration in 1917, in order to get them this land, all this wealth, things like that. They've gotten tons of aid from the United States after the United States took over Israel in post-World War II. Because the fact of the matter is these imperialist projects need an Israel, and so they need to keep these labor aristocrats, as I would call them, and you know, is an actual Marxist term. I'm not making it up on the spot. I'm not that brilliant. I'm not brilliant at all. But they need these labor aristocrats in order to exercise control within the region, because the Middle East is one of the most resource-rich regions in the world, especially within our modern-day industrial age. Oil is the lubricant of the bloodstream of industrialization, industrial behemoths. So it's really a spoiled child syndrome. You know, these are people who have been handed everything in the world, right? Have you ever seen like a rich child who's been given everything and then suddenly told no? They start.
Yeah, I grew up around Zionists in a very wealthy area, so.
Yeah,
and I never understood why I never got along with these people, and it came down to, oh, you're Nazis.
Right. But you know, when you tell that child no, they throw a temper tantrum, and suddenly everybody else is the bad guy, and there's no personal responsibility. I think also it speaks to this internal victim complex that Zionism has. It has a fatal flaw within its logic, right? It has a big hubris. Zionism always has to sort of prove itself to be indigenous, always sort of has to justify itself as a project. And it really can't do it in an objective reality, right? Any objective analysis of Zionism is that it's a... and I believe, especially the Likud party, and I've talked about this before, Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was the founder of revisionist Zionism. Modern-day Zionism, as it currently operates, is a really offshoot of Italian fascism. Because Vladimir Jabotinsky had insane ties with Italian fascists like Mussolini. The first revisionist Congress for the first World Zionist Organization Congress, I believe it was called. The revisionist Congress was held in fascist Italy. And current-day fascist Italian party members even have close ties with Israel. So it's a project that has a fatal logical error in that these are people who are claiming to be indigenous to this land, and yet they're killing indigenous people, like people who are 100 times more indigenous and legitimate than them.
Yeah.
They claim to be...
They ban the things that can prove that.
Oh, absolutely. There are people who claim that they're bringing civilization to this area of the world, and yet they bring nothing but barbarity and destruction. There are people who claim that they're making the desert green, and yet they're actually destroying everything. And there are people who claim that they are victims of Nazism and evoke this Nazi past, the shared trauma of the Jewish people, of anti-Semitic pogroms all over the world. And yet they do Nazi acts onto the Palestinian people every single day. It really seems as though to Zionists and the Zionist project currently, the bad thing that the Nazis did wasn't their, Lieberstrom, their continual expansion into other people's lands. It wasn't their mass killing of innocent civilians. It wasn't their occupation or apartheid against other peoples or quote unquote inferior peoples. It was really that they were anti-Semitic. Other than that, Zionists are okay with Nazism, and they're committing it against the Palestinian people. And so it's really a position of weakness in all objective reality. And of course, there's that word terrorist. The word terrorist is used by Zionists really to delegitimize legitimate governments. Hezbollah, Hamas are legitimate organizations that have 100 times more rights to, I understand after learning, for example, what happens in the West Bank and the apartheid, just that, and Gaza, of course, that just that humiliation of being a second-class citizen in your own land, a permanent refugee in your own land. Why the Palestinian liberation did October 7th. I mean, I understand it fully, 100%. I would not want to live like that either. And when no options are available, of course, violence is justified. And so...
Especially when that violence was not only, premeditated, it was shared with the Israeli government.
Right. Yeah, it's
the whole October 7th thing is, it's me in Israel inside job. They didn't do shit to stop it, and when it started, they delayed, and that they Hannibal directed. It's like they needed an impetus to start their Greater Israel plan.
Absolutely. And there's proof that they were well aware of what Hamas and the Al-Qassam brigades were planning. But
if you go back to what you were saying about weakness, I would say that all forms of entitlement are weakness. If you think about it, people who feel entitled are the weakest link generally.
Absolutely.
Because they don't have any substance because they feel they don't need it. So they absorb what they were told and go against what Judaism supposedly is to question everything.
Absolutely.
And question everything. Why it's like they're holding the Jewish brains of, Israel hostage by saying, well, if we don't do this to the Palestinians, they're going to do it to you.
Right.
And so if you're not okay with this, then you're okay with what happened on October 7th. So if we don't keep doing this, another October 7th will happen, and you don't want that, right? And it's this constant, and then Zionism can't exist without Christians, Jewish Zionism can't exist without Christian Zionism, and Zionism can't, and Israel has to exist for the second coming to exist. So not only does the Israel Zionism feel entitled to everything, they have the illusion of the support of the Christian Western world behind them.
Right.
So they feel like they have armor and they have this defense. Well, if you fuck with me, you're gonna fuck with my homies, and if the homies are gonna fuck with me, then they're anti-Semitic.
Right. I think October 7th has been one of the greatest blows into the Western hegemon since, let's say, the Tet Offensive in the Vietnam War, in which it has just completely shattered every single illusion that Western society was built on. Not only its invincibility, but also its moral foundation. The Western world was built on this foundation of spreading civilization, humanity, equality. And what the October 7th attack showed was, first of all, it put Palestine on a global map. Once again, the Palestine issue. And it showed that the Western world had been abetting the exact opposite of that. That, in fact, the Western... Omni Caesar very often said that Nazism, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but Nazism was nothing unique within the Western world. It was just what the Western world had done to its colonies, right? The people on the other end of its gun. And the only thing that was unique about Nazism was that it was turned against the people of Europe. Other than that, whereas within liberal mythology, Nazism is treated as this strange ideological deviation that Germany just decided to take in World War II. It was actually the logical conclusion of Western ideology and capitalist ideology. And it just happened to, and it was what the Western world had been doing for hundreds of years to millions of people. It just happened to happen onto the European theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I think October 7th once again showed that the West had been abetting. It put onto a global stage that the West's justifications for its own existence, civilization, et cetera, were wrong. That it, in fact, is a Nazi regime. And the only reason that the Nazis were wrong is that they did it onto the European theater. And it's really shattered this Western mythos of humanity, is what I'll say. And, of course, there's the word terrorist. I'm sorry. Am I talking too much?
No.
Okay. I also think the word terrorist is used to delegitimize these like very legitimate movements that are. It reminds me of how, for example, the Spanish came onto Tenochtitlan and saw these beautiful cities, right? These absolutely beautiful cities that were almost as bigger in some cases than many European urban centers, and ways of life that were just as justified, just as I'm looking for the right word, just as proper.
Advanced?
What was that?
Advanced?
Advanced, yes, advanced. As European places. And they came up with the word savages, right? Savage.
Mm-hmm.
And
Gotta dehumanize them.
Absolutely. It dehumanized these absolutely legitimate governments that were, and ways of life, even the hunter-gatherer indigenous people. These people had just as a legitimate walk to life, just as a legitimate reason to live, just as legitimate governments and societies as European society. And yet they used the word savage to delegitimize these so they could then do savagery onto the third world. I mean, the global south. I mean, indigenous people, the word.
Infantilize them like, oh, they don't like wear shoes, or they like, they don't have whatever we have. And it's like, bro, you don't shower and throw your shit outside of a window.
Absolutely. And while claiming to bring civilization, what did they bring? Destruction. And in fact, in the end, they ended up de-civilizing, right? They ended up destroying many civilian centers, and de-industrializing many places like India, China. And then
they'll have Zionists be like, well, then you should leave America. And it's like, so you get it. So you fucking get it.
Absolutely.
You're understanding that, like, it wasn't just, oh, we immigrated over here. No, we fucking colonized it.
Absolutely. And so the word terrorist.
And you say we because there were Jews with Columbus, and I know that because some of them are my ancient relatives.
Absolutely.
It's like no one's. It's just like you can see it when it's not you.
I know.
Daddy promised you. It's like Zionism is Veruca Salt. I want it now. No, shut the fuck up. You don't get it.
Absolutely.
Like, you wanted Argentina first. You wanted like 4 other places and settled on Palestine because in the early 1800s, there was a movement to have all the Jews go to Palestine.
Right.
In the 1830s, there was like a huge movement to get Jews to move to Palestine to kick off. I keep on bringing this back to Christian Zionism because I think it is so important because it influences like the Western idea of Israel.
Do you want to go into Christian Zionism?
Oh yeah.
So what is Christian? What is Christian Zionism? How does it operate? And what are your main issues with it?
Well, Christian Zionism started around 1830s, and it's essentially the need for all Jews to get rounded up and go to Israel so that the second coming of Christ can happen, so that the rapture can happen. And which developed into now in America, we have Kufi, which is, APAC, but for Christian people. And that has 10 million people as of like last year, probably has more now. 10 million people, Christians alone, that are Zionists for Israel. And that their entire premise is essentially like Nazism, is like rounding up the Jews. But instead, now it's for their own religious coming. So that they think that they're going to go to heaven if this happens.
So in Christian Zionism, the Jews don't get a good deal in the end when Jesus returns?
Names.
No, they don't also get to go to heaven? Or what happens to them? They go to hell, or Christ kills them? Like, what? Are they specific about it, or?
I'm sure that specific detail I didn't pay attention to.
Okay.
I also don't believe in God, so when it gets starting getting into that little nitty gritty, I'm like,
okay. And
whatever happens to me, it will happen to me. Whatever.
Right.
I'm one of the bad ones, so what happened? Rather not know what happens. But like the Balfour Declaration expressed like British support for the Jewish homeland, which was influenced by the British leaders who were Christian Zionists. Like they're always a nationalistic movement.
Mm.
And
Yellow? Oh, you cut off there.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So during the Holocaust, like that was also like a biblical fulfillment. So like this whole thing has also been, I was about to use a not good term for this conversation, has been bolstered by the idea that we need to let this happen. It doesn't matter if they're indigenous or not. We've got to agree. We've got to go with it. Because if Israel doesn't happen, we don't get to have our... And like they think that this is the only time that it will happen. If there's no more Israel, there is no rapture. The good Christians don't get to go to heaven, and the rest of us don't get to. I think the ones that don't get to go to heaven are all burned on earth during the second coming of Christ, with like the big scary demons.
Damn. Okay. Well, I don't really mind that, honestly.
I just uploaded a video from last year of American Dad explaining it, and since I uploaded it last year, rewatch it. But there is an American Dad clip of it, guys, if you want to go watch.
For sure. I think Stan is a perfect representation of not only Christian Zionism, but just this conservative. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's interesting how the word terrorist is used to just in the same way that Savage was used to like delegitimize governments in like I fucked it up. Tenochtitlan. Okay, I fucked that up. But you know what I'm saying, the Aztec capital. Just these like governments that were just as legitimate or even more legitimate in many cases. It's used, the word label terrorist against, for example, Hezbollah or Hamas is used to delegitimize these movements that are based on violence that are 100 times more legitimate than the violence that the Zionist project has used in order to found itself.
And they categorize the whole movement as like the military wings of these resistant movements when they have like government wings and like judicial wings, and they have like a whole setup.
Right.
And they'll say they're terrorists and then be like, well, they have the whole government and they've been leading like all of Gaza. Why couldn't they have made it better? It's like, absolutely. So are they military or are they like a terrorist group and it's not?
Right.
It's like they'll make up whatever. We haven't even talked about like the literal Hasbara handbook, which is a literal book of propaganda that was published for Zionists to use 4 talking points
Is
for people to
it
bring up.
is
It's a
Hasbara
literal.
is the book for anybody, or is it specifically for agents, like Mossad agents?
Buddy. It was written in 2002, and it's for promoting Israel on campus.
Oh. Oh my God, I've never heard of this book.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, we can go into a side tangent on that. I'm just gonna finish up by really quickly saying that, for example, Hezbollah and Hamas are 100 times more legitimate than the Israeli settler project. The word terrorist is sort of just a modern day N-word or savage, and yeah, it's just this disgusting double standard where Zionists are able to kill civilians in mass and then claim that they're not terrorists because, in theory, they were only hitting targets, military targets. But in all practice, yeah, in all practice, essentially, Israel is a terrorist group, and Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas have shown immense amounts of discipline in only targeting really military places. And yeah,
and it's easy for Israel to justify targeting, terrorists when they are literally under the impression that every single person there is a terrorist. They are taught in school that every Palestinian is bad, dangerous, violent, like wants to steal their land, yada yada, and then they are conscribed to go to the military.
Yeah.
Like, that's indoctrination. That's terrorism.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of an 18-year-old who since kindergarten has been told that I'm a savage that deserves to be shot, suddenly having a gun, being given a gun and given total power over me is the scariest thing in the world, I think. I cannot imagine what it means to be Palestinian. That reminds me, we're going off a lot of side tangents right now, but that reminds me of that.
Hello.
Yeah, that reminds me of that funny when Lebanese forces, Hezbollah, attacked an Israeli convoy. All the headlines were Lebanon attacks teenagers. Lebanon has slaughtered Israeli teenagers for no reason, when in fact these were soldiers, like 18-year-old soldiers who were sent to invade Lebanon. I think it's very insane. I think the impetus is on Israel for putting it's on Israel for putting these teenagers into this position, not Hezbollah. What were you saying?
Yeah, it's like it's conscribed there. It's mandatory. You if you want to be a citizen there, you have to serve.
Absolutely.
Like, even if you immigrate there, like that's what being taught to be a terrorist is. It's like every accusation is a confession.
Yes. I think that is why Zionists have an eternal victim complex, because they're constantly making confessions. To go back. But let's go to the Hasbara book in 2002. Have you read it?
I haven't read every single page of it. But I can give you a little brief overview because it's pretty detailed. It's not super long or anything.
Right. You've skimmed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in my comments every day.
Okay.
So the contents, there are a couple sections of it. The principles of Israel advocacy, skills for Israel advocacy, and Israel accusations and rebuttals.
Okay.
And each of these sections breaks down how to speak with people. The principles of Israel advocacy, the last chapter in that section is called Just Walk Away When Not to Engage. It's giving key points of basically nowadays pink washing. Ways to promote Israel and be proactive. Vigil for victims of terror. Petition for the return of missing Israeli soldiers. Solidarity mission. Israel information stall at university. Write an article for university paper. Demonstrate against Palestinian corruption. And so on and so forth. Rally outside an Iranian embassy to denounce support to terrorism. This is in 2002, mind you. They also have point scoring for genuine debates.
Okay. Okay. I've never seen a state publish a book where on how to argue with other people why that state is justified. I think this is really just a project that is like fundamentally has a shame, right? It's both narcissistic and it has an ego blow to it. You know, it has to prove itself constantly.
Attacking Jews for Israel's actions. There's a level at which it is obvious that attacks on Jews as a result of opposition to Israel are unacceptable. Violent or abusive attacks as part of political exchanges are always wrong. More subtle processes also serve to attack Jews. A lack of support for Jewish social services or Holocaust memorial days might be motivated by an opposition to Israeli policies. This, however, subtly an example of anti-Semitism.
Crazy. Crazy. So what they're saying is that attacking Zionism is attacking Jewish people, essentially.
Oh yeah, that's the Fighting Anti-Semitism page.
So they're deliberately telling people to read the Hasbara book to conflate Semitism with or Jewish people with Zionism as much as possible, and so like attacking Zionism is to attack Jewish people, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that
and
is
they
insane.
Keep about media bias and Israel, being confused.
Media
A picture's
bias
worth
in
1,000
Israel.
words.
Media bias in Israel. I think it's really the opposite. I don't really understand their idea that the media is too harsh on Israel, but there is that idea.
Yeah, so it's like it's the idea that this is an in good faith nation state is a lie. Because no one can say, oh, well, like, this was as a result of the Holocaust. Jews needed the safe place to go. Okay, well, this was put in plan before the Holocaust, Like, in the 1830s, this started happening. Settlements started happening before the Holocaust happened.
Right.
And they weren't, like, the legal kind of immigration of, like, oh, this Jewish community just, like, wants to go move somewhere.
Right. Right. It reminds me of how America was founded and how American settlers had like different ideas of privatization compared to like indigenous people. And these settlers would like quote unquote buy land legally, and like the people whose land would get sold didn't even understand what was happening. In the same way in Palestine, it's very similar things happened to the Palestinian people who had like more of a communal ownership of land than these Westerners were accustomed to, and were sort of forced to have like private property ownership. It's just insane in general.
Well, yeah, and then the British took over, their ownership of their land, and it's just like the Palestinian history of the ownership of their own land has been thrown around and taken out of their hands for so long for, quite frankly, little to no reason.
Absolutely. I want to move this conversation on to the expansion of the Israeli project into Lebanon. Why do you personally think having such close connections to Zionism, of course, early on in life and having visited Israel itself briefly, but why do you think Israel has expanded its war into Lebanon? Is it because they're not getting the results they need in Gaza? Is it because they want to draw America into this? Is it because it's part of their settler colonialist project?
Oh, absolutely part of their settler colonial project. They want to have greater Israel. This has been, an article just came out today saying that the hostages was never really the point in the first place.
Right.
The colonial project was.
Right.
So they needed something to happen so that they could start invading not just Palestine, but start annexing parts of Lebanon for their Greater Israel project, which is, once again, a concept by Big Daddy Herzl, which is the non-biblical Jewish state stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates.
Nile to the Euphrates. So that would be in Iraq.
Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, a little bit of Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and a little bit of Egypt.
How did Herzl envision this? Is it the same as what they envision it in modern day?
Geopolitical implications, like annexing these neighborhoods. Do you mean like completely eradicating, ethnically cleansing? Yes, that is the plan.
So it's been the plan since day one. It was Herzl's plan to just militarily take over basically just this huge chunk of the Middle East.
Yeah, when you know the saying is like, give them an inch and they take a mile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this expansion into Lebanon is part of their greater Israel project, in your opinion. They just want as much land as possible to take for themselves and their citizens. Why do you think Israel, though, acts like it's so invincible? Even as it hasn't gotten to military objectives in Gaza. You know, the Al Qassam brigades stay as strong as ever and continue to reform almost after a year. It's rescued none of its hostages, which on paper is the reason why it's started this war. So it seems like a big loss to just publicly a humiliating loss. And of course, it's completely unmatched against Hezbollah. And it knows this. It can't win against Hezbollah, as Hezbollah has given it, absolutely crushing defeats as they've tried to do ground invasions. Why do you think Israel feels so invincible, though? And able to do this?
Quite frankly, I don't know the actual reasons. It's insane to me. But who's stopping them? What have we seen in the last year that's stopping them?
Absolutely nothing.
No. And not only is it now like their greater Israel plan, but like kind of how I mentioned earlier, is like they're now attacking like pretty directly the UN and UN agencies. And they've killed more journalists, medical and healthcare workers, and foreign workers in like this past year than any other war, and children.
Right.
And so it's like, and they're not, and none of this is on a ground battle. Like, they aren't doing fisticuffs here. Like, these are from like airstrikes and bombings and autonomous robots and whatever. And now they are being pushed back in Lebanon like pretty easily without using any of their military arsenal other than, human labor.
Right. So essentially, you think it's because absolutely nobody stopped them, and in fact, America's continued to support them 100 times fold, as they've done this genocide in Gaza, and sort of showed them that they have a green light to do whatever they want.
Yeah, and they've even, they're threatening to nuke like Tehran.
Right. And of course, America would stand behind them if they did that.
Right.
Right.
And then you have like the like inner working and stuff, like the Iranian government, of like how shitty that is, and then like the global like resistance of the Iranian movement, and I know they're both related, and like they're going to use the national problems in Iran as a way to justify, just like they did for Palestine. Well, they don't have women's rights, so let's fucking nuke them.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely the solution. Thank you.
Including the woman who we're trying to free.
Well, it's like the whole pink washing thing. Like, they wouldn't like your kind out there. Okay, so let's kill my kind out there. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one thing I keep on running into is people saying that Palestinians would throw me or X person or Y person off of a roof. I don't know where this came from, because Palestinians have never thrown anybody off of a roof.
It's an article that they think that ISIS, the Taliban, and all of the H groups are all of the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They think that all of them are the exact same thing. And so that, I believe it was in Syria that this happened in, and it was by ISIS. And it was like, I think one time maybe.
And ISIS is an Iraqi group. So
Yeah.
it's insane that the entire Middle East, I mean, from Morocco to
Islamophobia.
what was that?
It's Islamophobia.
And it's Islamophobia too, because no one will acknowledge that Palestinians aren't just Muslim people. And Palestinian people aren't Arab people. They are Arabized people.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
They're
People to acknowledge that.
they're Canaanite descendants of the Levant, some of the original people in the Levant who have been Arabized.
we never left.
Yeah, yeah. But it's insane that I keep on running into this stereotype. Like they'll throw you off a roof. And it's like, this is one event by one group, which is ISIS in. You mentioned Syria. ISIS is from Iraq, so let's just say like some random town in Iraq, and you're painting the entire region of the Middle East, like Morocco to Afghanistan, with the same exact brush. It's insane. It's an insane amount of Islamophobia, like you mentioned, Orientalism, and dehumanization. Whereas, Palestinian people have been at the forefront of national progressive liberation all over the world, from African Americans to, Vietnam War. They've always been on sort of the quote unquote right side of history globally. So it's just insane that they're painted as these ooga booga cavemen in order to justify. Again, it's that hypothetical of what they could do. And this theory that the Western world holds, that these people are hypothetically could do damage, allows them to, in practice, do way more damage than these people ever hypothetically even could. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. And like, if you want to
Bring it back to like, not you, but theoretically you, to Islam. It's like Islam is an like extremely peaceful religion where like they might not agree with homosexuality, but that doesn't make them do violence onto people who are queer.
Absolutely.
like that's very clear. Like
You don't just like be violent to people you don't like. That is not an Islamic thing.
Absolutely. And there's also so many
extremism. They're just like there's extremism in like Christianity and Judaism and every other religion in the world. There are so many than the three we're just mentioning now. It's like there's just people who are extreme and will use their religion to justify anything because that makes them feel godly, that makes them feel grandiose. They're going to use that excuse because they feel that. Like, I think maybe that's what makes Israel feel invincible, is that they think that they are the chosen people. They think that like this is the holiest of lands, like it's
Right.
emboldening them because they think they are doing some sort of act of God, which like I guess like you're taking people's lives away, which is an act of God.
Right. And what's more crazy is that they'll label groups like Hezbollah as terrorists when Hezbollah has in fact attacked ISIS in Syria. They helped in coalition with Syria to attack terrorists like ISIS, like Al Qaeda. So I think it's this inability to view the Muslim world, whatever that is. A lot of people hate that term, and rightfully so.
Because it's generalizing, like one of the largest swaths of people in the world.
Right. It's
and Arab people aren't even the biggest population of Muslims in the world. It's Indonesian people.
and India, you could sort of say.
And India, yes.
Yeah. I think it's Indonesia and India are the top two.
Yeah, so it's Asia.
Right. And so it's like they don't even know. It's just such blatant
Islamophobia and racism
that like
it's right in your face.
Absolutely. And an inability.
And by associating the Palestinians with them, that's how they get on that Ooga Booga, train.
Oh,
instead of going, well, Jesus was Palestinian, so okay.
Absolutely. And an inability to even recognize just how diverse Islam itself is, like politically. Like there's so many different currents. It'd be like painting the entirety of Christianity with one current. Like how many sects of Christianity are there, especially after the Protestant Revolution? Like so fucking many.
Like, okay, I just watched, that Mormon Wives show, so I'll just assume every Christian's like that now. Like, I'm sure they would not like that, right? Like, it's wild to me, too, that that there are so many different levels of every religion that no one can see outside of, not no one, but these people can't see outside of their own sect of their religion, that like there are other people who think other ways. And I guess like that kind of just like no community is a monolith thing.
Yeah.
But I guess when you're a bad person, everybody is a monolith. Like you have to think that way to rationalize what you're doing, or else there is going to be a dichotomy.
Yeah. Yeah. During the Syrian civil war, and I don't know if you've heard this, it's a political quagmire that even I'm not able to wrap my head around. I've just only started, and I barely understand it at all. But groups like Hezbollah were fighting ISIS, but in fact, Israel and America were backing ISIS in that war. And for example, Israel would even take, and it's been well reported, injured ISIS soldiers and heal them in hospitals, things like that, give them medical aid. And of course, America has a long history with Al-Qaeda, funding Al-Qaeda. So this war against terrorism is not...
that Israel funded Hamas, right? Funded and created?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
They allowed...
So they're creating these people that they hate so much so that they can then justify doing to the greater populace. Like, their collateral damage, collective punishment thing is like justifiable when these, we make sweeping generalizations. You just dehumanize people.
Oh, of course. And also, in their war against terrorism, they actually end up supporting the terrorists and fighting the groups that are suppressing terrorism. I mean, it's insane.
How many more like Bush's saying that he was wrong speeches are we gonna have? Like in the coming years? Like every time this has happened, we've been wrong. Like if you're on the side of America, you're wrong. If you're on the side of America, you're wrong. And generally, if you're on the side of white people, you're probably wrong.
Yeah. Generally, you'll be right in that. Like occasionally, like
Right. This is why we don't generalize.
Occasionally,
no black and white thinking here.
Occasionally, like America will fight Nazis, so it's not always.
How many years after? It's not like, at the beginning we should probably stop this, and it's like, this 30-day thing that just happened. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's also this insane media narrative that America does this, supports Israel wholeheartedly. Not because it needs a rabid dog that does, I mean, that is what Israel is. It does all the actions that America doesn't want to do directly, right? It's such a handy little tool, like a rabid dog that weakens your enemies and secures your oil, which is the lifeblood of our industrial revolution and our modern day age, the lifeblood of it. And weakens these states. It does it for you, like sort of like a rabid dog, and you can sort of wipe your hands clean, right? That's what Israel really is, in my opinion. It's the unsinkable aircraft carrier, as one of our politicians, Alexander Haig, said. That's what Israel is. This aircraft carrier that can't be sunk. But it is insane that
America's outlet to the Middle East, right? It's their stronghold there. Their stronghold to the canal. If they don't have Israel, Yemen's like, fuck y'all.
Absolutely. And America, I was talking to my girlfriend. She lives in Morocco. America does have... what was that?
I said, shout out, girlfriend.
America does have all of these client states within the Middle East, and especially the Gulf region, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Morocco itself. And I was talking to her like, why is Egypt and Morocco, UAE, like such bitches to America? And she said like very like poignantly that in fact this is the only way that they can survive. If you even oppose America, you end up Libya, right? Gaddafi or Iraq. Or Iraq, it's you get blown up. You get Lebanon during the Civil War. It's so you have to be a client state of America, but America doesn't have full control over Saudi Arabia. or the UAE. These states act independently, but Israel is the one that America has a direct control over, right? It's its puppet. It's the securest investment America has within the Middle East. Saudi Arabia will act independent. For example, during the OPEC crisis, during I believe it was the 1967 war, Saudi Arabia cut off oil supplies to the West and America. But Israel, America has 100% assured control over. And I think that's why it needs this rabid dog. They can both do the things that America doesn't want to do directly, and America can wipe its hands clean. But also because it's the only state that it has 100% puppet control over. If you want to add anything.
It's like an outpost.
A military, economic, resourcical outpost for America and for the West. Like, and a moral outpost. I'll bring it back to what we were saying earlier with the indigenous people of Turtle Island. If we start admitting that Israel is wrong, we're going to have to start admitting more people are wrong.
Right, that our project is wrong.
The Holocaust wasn't necessarily a land grab issue, right? So they did go outside of just Germany, but it wasn't the same means. They'd have to start really looking deep into America and what actual reparations and actual land back means. And I don't think they're even touching out with a 10-foot pole at this point.
Right. It's sort of part of this colonial mythos, and if Israel gets proved wrong, America gets proved wrong, and so even though you've got this sort of wrong worldview, you just sort of have to keep on committing to it, right? Even though it's insane, and less people believe in it.
It's you have to double down, kind of thing, when you're backed into a corner.
Sunk cost fallacy,
Yeah, totally. It's it kind of.
The world's most insane sunk cost fallacy.
And that's what it keeps on feeling like with these red lines that Biden keeps drawing.
Right. There is no red line, really.
No.
And the Biden...
It's going to be once there's an attack on U.S. soil.
Even then, I don't think there would be a red line, because the Biden regime does this double-faced thing where it'll say something to the public, oh, we're stopping Israel, but it gives Israel the go-ahead behind closed doors.
And 100 freaking soldiers and defense the same day.
Absolutely. Yeah, but
because they know people aren't going to do the looking into what past what they announced, and it's just they can't pull off the same shit that you did 80 years ago.
No, not at all. Especially in a world where people are more educated than ever.
And live streaming their own genocide instead of just seeing it through the narrative lens of the media.
Yeah, it's very hard to do it in the modern day, but it's still being done.
Yeah, it's wild.
But I think, the Nazis in the Holocaust was a very easy way for the West in general just to wipe off the dirt of their own anti-Semitism and just sort of put it all on Germany, and get rid of responsibility for their own anti-Semitic past. I mean, America was immensely anti-Semitic. All the European states were immensely anti-Semitic. And so when they say, in fact, America turned around a ship full of Jews fleeing the Holocaust, I mean, that's a very famous event, And so when we say that we support Israel out of a love for the Jewish people and not because it's part of America's state building project, not because this is a dirty dog, rabid dog that does all the things that we want to do and we can wipe our hands clean of, not as a way to secure our oil assets. It's just this insane mythos building that the West does, that it does in order to sort of separate itself from its own guilt in the Western anti-Semitism that led up to the Holocaust, which it never paid for. And only Germany was made to sort of pseudo pay for, but it actually really wasn't, because a lot of the Nazi officials were let go and put back into power. If you want to add anything to that.
Other countries, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of, Nazis moved to other countries and started their own little communities there of right-wing whack jobs.
Canada, Argentina, yeah.
Have you followed that guy who does the geo maps where he tries to guess what country it is and then he relates it back to Israel?
No, I have
Like
not.
it's like that location finder where it's a picture of somewhere and you try to guess where it is on a map and it tells you how far your guess is from the actual picture.
Oh yeah, I've seen
And
that.
so, oh yeah, I've just recently gotten into his videos. They're very good.
That sounds fun. Bringing this up, a lot of institutions, Jewish institutions within America, have sort of had a reckoning in how Israel has sort of just infiltrated them. A lot of Holocaust museums are heavily tied with Israel. A lot of synagogues have Israeli flags in them. And so this October 7th and this war has sort of been a reckoning for the Jewish community in America, and how Israel has sort of been able to convince a lot of American Jews that Israel is their best interest, that Zionism is their best interest, and how it's been able to infiltrate almost every single Jewish space. It's opened up a lot of dialogues within the Jewish community. Well, how do you think Israel has been able to infiltrate the Jewish community just globally in this way, Zionism globally in this way? And what do you make of it?
It's embedded. It's embedded. I mean, ever since I can remember, I mean, I was born in 93. Israel has been for the Jews, quote unquote. I always knew it was a place that I could go live, I could go visit, whatever. It was, a Jewish thing. I can't recall if, I don't believe my temple had an Israeli flag at it. That doesn't mean it didn't. But I remember having the blue tzedakah boxes, which is like our charity kind of thing, like giving back. But they're not like actual charities. It's JNF, the Jewish National Foundation, which plants trees, which I believe are non-native, over Palestinian villages that have been wiped out.
Oh yeah, and those led to fires when Hezbollah struck one of those towns.
Even when I went to Israel, one of our last days, we went planting those trees.
Oh my God.
And I didn't know. They tell you we're revitalizing the land. We're and me, I'm just into environmental stuff at this age, just starting to get into it. I'm oh yeah, let's plant trees. Woohoo. I'm so excited. My whole thing is plants and queer. I love gardening. Mm-hmm. And a couple of years later, finding out what was really happening, they were essentially just planting a bush over a grave, an indigenous person's grave.
Yeah, it's insane. It reminds
that's fucked up.
Yeah. It's a very common colonial practice, bringing non-indigenous things into places and fucking up the environment. But why do you think Zionism has been infiltrated American culture, American Jewish spaces?
Zionism. They don't tell you in Zionism.
Okay.
I didn't know the word Zionism until after. I'm sure I heard it or whatever. My family aren't Zionists either. They're kind of the form your own opinion kind of people. So I talked to my parents growing up about things. I never understood why Jewish people get their own homeland. It never made sense to me. I'm yeah, they're doing it with violence. That seems not a deserving purpose or means of getting what you want. This, it never made sense to me. And I'm not sure until recently they really had the words to express, what they wanted to tell me at the time. But they don't tell you with Zionism. You didn't you weren't yeah, I'm a Zionist.
Okay, so
I think that was an embarrassing thing to know about up until recently.
So it's basically just conflated with being a Jewish person when you're being raised in this culture.
Yeah, Israel is Jewish. Jewish is Israel. You are Jewish. It doesn't have to be you don't have to go to Israel, but you have the right to if you want to. Birthright trips. You can do that if you want. That kind of shit. You can get citizenship. All that stuff. We would sing some songs about Israel and there was this pretty famous Jewish rapper for like my generation growing up called Modest Yahoo, which is like the opposite of what Inez is, who's a Palestinian American rapper, who I think implanted a lot of Zionist ideas into like my age group of Jewish Americans about Israel and about like, oh, it's just about peace and love, like two-state solution, like a lot of like two-state solution pushing. Like,
Okay.
that's a huge thing of how you get like, I think, the Zionism into the communities without making people feel bad per se.
Okay, so the way that they sort of manufacture consent for like, let's say like more progressive leaning young Jewish people or people in the Jewish community is like saying like, oh, we just want a two-state solution.
Yeah.
Like they don't, I'm sure right now, you know, the propaganda, even like just being American, you're not seeing, if you don't follow News Cord, they are a social media page organization that basically compares how different media sites reports on things like the teenage boys who were killed kind of shit, and compares it with like what other media outlets said about, like, generally it's Al Jazeera who's correct, or TRT. And, you know, like American media, they aren't seeing things that are happening unless they're seeing it on our TikToks or on, you know, our Instagrams, or they're in these spaces because nobody's talking about it. No one's reporting about it. It's not mainstream media somehow. And so if you're just saying like, oh, it's a two-state solution, like nothing's really happened since October 7th, except for like a couple bad massacres and like some Lebanon bombings, like, you know, all of the Jewish influencers and stuff, they all are posting like it's normal life, it's normal. You know, they're going to the clubs, they're having fun. Like, so if it's just like peace, love, Tel Aviv raves, we're going to a festival in the middle of a desert. No, it's 3 miles away from the border with Gaza at a military compound.
Okay,
Like,
so
it's like they're not telling the full truth. They're admitting almost everything.
okay, so the Zionism is advertised first of all as just like sort of synonymous with Jewish people within the American, you know, Jewish community.
Yeah.
And it also is just sort of treated as like both progressive peace and love ideology, and also Israel is just sort of treated as like a European destination country, you know, like clubs, parties, and so you don't really get to see apartheid, genocide.
It's safe for the gays. It's safe for the gays, except like you can't legally get married there.
Interesting.
And then when you get to like anti-Semitism and stuff, then they only prop up that like Jews are Zionist, when like in reality there are more members of Kufi, like just singularly in America, than there are like Jews in America.
So I think this has created a large split within the American Jewish community in general, this Israel question. You know, there's a lot of American Jews that are anti-Israel. There are rabbis that are anti-Israel and pro-Palestine. Some of the biggest pro-Palestine movements have been led by Jews, American Jewish activists. Some of the greatest scholars on the Palestine question and Palestinian liberation have been Jewish people like and Israelis like Ian Pape, Finkelstein or Finkelstein.
There are both pronunciations, but I think he is Steen.
Steen, okay.
Finkelstein?
It's always Steen.
I cannot remember.
It's always Steen. The Ashkenazi last name, it's always a Steen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Finkelstein. But there's also so many Jewish people in America who are so ardently pro-Zionist, so ardently pro-Israel. and say that anybody who isn't is a self-hating Jew. How do you think this will play out? Just this divide. How do you see an end to this divide? Do you see like what do you think will happen to the Jewish community within America? Like, how do you see this divide playing out in the future?
Well, I can say
Just especially personally right now, I've essentially lost all connections to people from my childhood, my college years, my time abroad, my time at camp, my time in youth group, my time in my sorority. These were all Jewish communities I had. Granted, I never was extremely close with a lot of them because of now knowing they're Zionists. And when like you hold Zionist beliefs and you're okay with dehumanizing people, which I've never been okay with. So like I've always clocked that. I've always been a neurodivergent person that like calls people out when they say weird shit.
Yeah.
So like I've never really fit in with these communities. And I think a lot of Zionists, a lot of anti-Zionist Jews have also kind of felt this, but not really known what's been the precursor. We're like, I'm sure this is extremely similar to what Muslim Americans felt like after 9/11, especially visibly Muslim people, is that like everybody assumed you were a terrorist for some fucking reason. And it's like, I don't want anybody to like know I'm Jewish because I don't want people to think I'm a Zionist. I don't want to have to like, because once I start talking, I don't stop.
Right.
And I've always felt weird going into like very like spiritual and religious places because a lot of times it's like about Israel or about like something that's super hypocritical about peace or about like.
Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but would you say that the Western Jewish community is sort of having an identity crisis right now?
I would say yes, but not just so an identity crisis. I think there's going to be a fundamental shift in practice and in community spaces. I don't foresee anti-Zionist Jews and Zionist Jews really coming together in spaces much for I mean, that's just also how I am personally. Though I think as a community for anti-Zionist Jews, they probably feel the same. It's been very like, how do you hold the same religious space where you're being like with God and being your most religious and sit next to people who will dehumanize and justify the slaughtering of people just for their own theoretic persecution. You know, it's not like, oh, we disagree on like gay rights kind of thing. Which I'm also like kind of very on an extremism that like I don't hold space for people once I've held conversations with them. Like if they are a certain type of person or hold certain types of beliefs, like I don't personally just like get with that. But I think fundamentally this will have changed the Jewish community because so many Jews conflate, like they'll say like, oh, what do you say during this prayer then? Because it'll mention like Israel. And it's like, you fundamentally don't know that Israel's a person. So like, I'm not even that religious. And like you
he was a king, right?
Praying.
King
like,
Israel?
One of the descendants, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Of Abraham. Whatever. Start thinking about that. My brain will get on a different subject.
Sorry about that.
It's like now I don't even know what I'm talking about. But like, even if it were about a place, I don't think, because I don't know, you know, how long is this whole war gonna last, you know?
Yeah.
Does it result in like I think ideally what we want is like a no more Israel and have a Palestine, and Palestinians are, the leaders and owners and government of the land.
Yeah.
But like, is that going to happen? I don't know. If that happens, yeah, there's absolutely no way Jewish communities are going to be able to be mixed with like Zionists and anti-Zionists.
Yeah.
Just like, I think like it's really hard for with like probably MAGA Christians and non-MAGA Christians to be together. I assume it's really difficult for them too.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like there's just a big sectarian divide going on in the Jewish community right now. And I can't.
Always has been.
Oh, what's that?
Because
There kind of has always been too, at least
Okay.
in my generation of Judaism. I don't know how far back this goes, but like Judaism has, as long as I've known it, has always been also a very secular religion, because it's like an ethno religion, whatever. Like you can be atheist and be Jewish.
But did it exist to this extreme before October 7th?
No,
No.
I don't think a lot of anti-Zionist Jews knew that they were anti-Zionist until October 7th.
Okay. Okay.
It's like the awakening of a lot of, dormant anti-Zionist Jews.
So before this, like anti-Zionist Jews and Zionist Jews were able to sort of coexist in some Jewish places, you would say, and this has just sort of ruptured that.
oh yeah, I would say it's
Like kind of like, pre-Trump and post-Trump for those kind of families. Not my family, but like, I feel like there are families that are like that, where they were able to like coexist with their different views. And now it's like, either we just like are okay existing, or like I've cut you off kind of thing. But then also, again, that's just I'm a radical person, so that might not,
No, I've
we're
heard similar.
generalizing again.
I've heard similar things from other Jewish people. And
Like with like people, at JVP things, I just moved to a different state, so I haven't found anything here yet. I've only been here a month and a half. But when I was down in LA, very similar sentiments of like, we don't really know where we are going to be like as a community, or even if we want to be in community at all. I mean, I would never want to be like, yeah, I'm sitting next to a Nazi. I'm never going to say, yeah, I'm sitting next to a Zionist. Like, to me, it's the exact fucking same thing. I see no fundamental difference.
right.
Personally.
Right. Yeah. And I can't imagine like even going to a synagogue with like a pro-Israeli
oh my god.
rabbi.
Did you hear that, Rabbi? We just had this past weekend, Yom Kippur, which is like our holiday for atonement, and whatevering our sins. Did you hear that rabbi's sermon?
No.
Circulating. One of my mutuals. It was actually their childhood rabbi. Oh my God, it was so bad.
What do you say? For people outside of sort of the Jewish community that aren't in tune with these kinds of things.
I'm trying to remember.
It was essentially like, the Palestinians are bad. This is justified. Like,
yeah,
they're just spewing the same kind of shit that the people who are blocking aid at the borders are spewing. And then, there are anti-war Jews who are, part of the ceasefire movement, who are not anti-Zionist Jews. They believe in a two-state solution. They believe in like Jewish, right to the land, but they are anti-war. So there's also like those people who, some people are like, yeah, well, it's like they're coming in for the conversation. And it's like, that's the same conversation we've been having for, almost 80 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely been hard for the Jewish community within America, it seems like. and a lot, but I think also it's awakened a lot of anti-Zionist Jewish people to the people around them and where they stand on this position. So that certainly is good.
Yeah, it's definitely like shown like who you want to be into community with. Like, oh, these are the people I've been missing out on my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've been talking for almost an hour and 30 minutes. And so it's time to like start wrapping this up. I'll just end this with a switching from such a depressing topic. I'll just switch this over to something a little bit different. You've made a lot of videos about Colleen Ballinger, especially her apology a video, her ukulele apology video. Why was Colleen Ballinger in that specific ukulele video such like sort of like a cultural icon moment and just like sort of an insane sort of moment in your opinion? Like
I made so many videos about it.
Why was it so special in your opinion? And first of all, could you explain who Colleen Ballinger even is and why she was doing ukulele for anybody who's just very briefly?
For those lucky enough. Oh my goodness. She is a YouTube content creator. I think she probably is considered one of the OGs on YouTube. You might know her as Miranda Sings, which is essentially a mockery of an autistic girl. She made the character based off of like girls that she didn't like from her singing auditions or classes or something. And so, like, it had bad intentions to begin with and then continued with bad intentions. And her entire audience is children. And since she is an adult, she started her page in her, like, late 20s, I believe. Maybe early 30s. God, this was, like, last year, so I don't remember the exact details. But, she's like one of those people like, you know, Sabrina Carpenter who like is growing up and her fans are growing with her. She's not continuing with like children content, like Miley Cyrus kind of thing.
Yeah.
She is sticking with the exact same content she had when she started. So her fan base continues to stay children and her content is ableist, extremely sexual in nature. She has been accused of, not convicted of or charged with any kind of, but sexual harassment, inappropriate behaviors with minors.
Okay, so it's like sexually charged language?
Oh, yeah, but also like topics and gestures and dances and images and innuendos that aren't so much innuendos. She was also private messaging minors frequently, video chatting with them, sending them inappropriate pictures, and like conversing with them about inappropriate things like boyfriends and girlfriends and things. And these are minors. She's like an adult. And last summer, a bunch of this all came out, and there's a bunch of podcast doing deep dives on it, and I got just really entrenched in it because I absolutely never liked her. I was never a YouTube person, but I saw her stuff like randomly sometimes, and she got a Netflix show, and it's just like, this is making fun of autistic people. Like there's nothing more to this than being insanely offensive and rude.
Okay, but what led up to the ukulele apology?
Right. So a bunch of this stuff came out, like with these like deep diving podcasts and stuff. And so in response, instead of addressing any of it, like of these serious allegations of like sexual harassment and assault, like and like having inappropriate conversations with minors, she made a ukulele song, like not even apologizing, but like saying, hey, I'm sorry you viewed it like this. And like, maybe it wasn't the best thing, but like, yeah, it happened. What are we going to do about it? Arf, arf, arf.
Right.
And like the issue is like her fan base is like preteens and younger. and she's like talking to them online in private groups and messaging them and being inappropriate, and then like bringing people on stage and like making them like stick their hands down her pants to get popcorn and shit.
Yes. That's fucking crazy. And apologizing about or not even apologizing, but talking about rape allegations over ukulele music. That is,
And it was like not just
her too. It was like people who were in her inner circle who were like on tour with her and stuff, who also were like people who shouldn't even have been around kids, kind of stuff. And yeah, she's like, all right, let me pop open the ukulele because this is on brand for me. And it's like, oh, I think a notes app might have been better.
yeah. I think it's easily one of the most insane YouTuber apologies on Earth. I don't think it'll ever be topped, honestly. And
I was like
balls deep in it last year, and I was like, I always knew this was gonna happen, so I made it.
You finally saw
yeah.
You finally saw the fall of Colleen Ballinger, as you've always been. Yeah.
Sorry if that like hits your FYP all the time.
It's okay.
It's so bad.
So, and then with that, one last piece of breaking news. RFK Jr. Weird sexting chats leaked, and I'm not kidding. Daily Mail just leaked right now. Okay.
You can really apologize.
Yeah, maybe. And thank you so much, Murph, Plants and Queer, for being on here. Tell people where they can best find you, and if you have any closing thoughts, final words.
right. You can
Find me at Plants and Queer or at m.x.murph on
Instagram.
and I want to say thank you for having me. I personally really love your content. I'm learning a ton. It is so nice to finally like hear from people who I very much agree with. You know, this past week has been wild with the situation with Angela Davis, if you will. But also just thank you for having me to have this discussion. I came in here with some more notes to like talk more facts, but I think I got carried away with my personal experience with what's happening. But I think it's just so important for us to not stop talking about this, regardless of, you know, if they die down, or die down, wrong way of saying it, but if this things slow down, and that we keep these people on the tips of our tongue, because we are literally seeing the extermination of an entire people, and we're funding it. People are celebrating voting for people who are funding it and okay with it. And the more we talk about it, the more people will be forced to listen.
Absolutely.
I think it's really important. Yeah, because I think why a lot of people a lot of the dormant anti-Zionist Jews and people in general were dormant before October 7th is because a lot of us were talking about this in 2021 when things were happening, and I think we stopped talking about it, and I think that is what led to October 7th. Is the not like us as the people, it's just like the global silence, like blindness to it.
Okay. Thank you so much for being on. This has been absolutely lovely. You know, going from Colleen Ballinger to talking about what's happening is a bit of a weird tonal shift. I don't think we should have gone down the Colleen Ballinger.
It's okay. It's okay. Because it kind of circles back to like what I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, because I was, you know, a therapist for people who had committed sexual crimes. So like I think like it was kind of you know, you're thinking about the content I make, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's circle back.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you so much for being on, and this has been an absolutely enlightening conversation. You have a great rest of your day, Murph.
Thank you. You too.
This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you.
What the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely made.
And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.